Have you ever been listening to a piece of classical music and just felt like there's something else going on? Something hidden just under the surface. Maybe a message or a story, a secret that was only meant for a few people to understand? Well, you might be onto something. Let's dive into the hidden languages woven into some of the world's most famous pieces of music.
It's an idea that has fascinated people for centuries. The thought that these great composers might have been embedding secret messages in their work. It's just so powerful. It turns a beautiful symphony into a kind of musical Da Vinci Code, right? A puzzle just sitting there waiting for us to solve it.
And this idea, it really took off with theories about Beethoven. The story goes that he sprinkled these secret, unexplained symbols all through his scores, like a hidden layer of instructions for how to play the music the right way. But as cool as that sounds, it runs into one, pretty major problem: Beethoven himself.
Yeah, this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the composer's personality. Beethoven was famously, almost pathologically, obsessed with clarity. I mean, this is the guy who painstakingly added metronome markings to his symphonies so there would be zero ambiguity. He wrote out instructions like Allegro con brio ed appassionato, fast with brilliance and passion. He wanted performers to know exactly what he was thinking. Hiding his true meaning behind some secret code? It doesn't fit the man. But that doesn't mean the secrets aren't there. It just means we've been looking for the wrong kind.
See, the real secrets aren't about complicated instructions or hidden treasure maps. They're way more personal than that. Sometimes it's as simple as a composer wanting to sign their name, not with a pen, but with the notes themselves.
There's actually a name for this practice. It's called a musical cryptogram. It's this technique where letters are translated into musical notes, which lets composers literally write names and words right into the melody. And one of the most powerful and famous examples, it comes from a composer who had every single reason to hide his identity right out in the open.
Meet Dmitri Shostakovich. Now, he spent most of his career working under the oppressive thumb of the Soviet regime. Openly defying them was basically a death sentence. So he found another way to assert his identity, his artistic soul. He wove his own musical signature, DSCH, into the very fabric of his music. But how do you get DSCH from musical notes?
Okay, so the key to this whole code lies in the German musical alphabet. While we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, German notation has a couple of really key differences. The letter S can stand for S, which is what they call E flat, and, most importantly, what we call a B natural, they call H. So, using the German spelling of his name, Shostakovich, he could create this amazing four-note motif, DSCH, or in notes, D, E flat, C, B natural. And believe me, this wasn't just some clever trick, this was an act of artistic survival.
This haunting, personal theme pops up again and again in his most autobiographical pieces. You can hear it as this cry of defiance in his 10th Symphony, which he wrote right after Stalin died. It's the bleak, central theme of his 8th String Quartet, a piece he subtitled To the Victims of Fascism and War, which everyone basically understood to include himself. It's his signature. It's his I was here, embedded in the music for all time. But these personal signatures, they could also carry messages of a very different kind.
So Shostakovich used his code as a shield, as a signature. But other composers used musical secrets for something way more intimate, to send messages to the people they loved.
Robert Schumann's life was just a whirlwind of passion, creativity, and struggle, and right at the center of it all was his love for the brilliant pianist Clara Wieck. The problem was her father absolutely forbade their relationship, which forced them to communicate in secret. And for Schumann, music was the ultimate secret language. He filled his piano pieces with these musical codes and illusions that only Clara would get, turning his compositions into these incredibly passionate love letters.
And this quote just nails the magic of what Schumann did. Even though these messages were intensely private, meant for Clara, they feel completely universal. When we listen, it's like Schumann is speaking directly to us, sharing his deepest secrets. It's that confessional, intimate quality that makes his music so powerful.
Schumann's codes were all about emotion and personal connection. But if we rewind another 100 years to the Baroque era, we find composers like Johann Sebastian Bach using a totally different kind of code, one that wasn't based on romance, but on logic, faith, and the hidden power of numbers.
So get this, the number 14. To us, it's just a number. But to Bach, it was a signature.
Using a system called gematria, where letters get assigned numerical values, the letters of his own name added up to 14. B is 2, A is 1, C is 3, and H is 8. Add them up, 14. He would embed this number everywhere, structuring pieces with 14 themes or using 14 notes in a melody. It was his way of embedding his own identity and his faith in a divine, ordered universe right into his work. But numbers, they were just one part of a much bigger system.
Back in the Baroque period, a lot of composers and theorists believed in something called the doctrine of affections. The basic idea was that music wasn't just art, it was a science of emotion. They believed that specific musical gestures, like a rising scale or a certain rhythm or a particular harmony, could be used like a toolkit to directly and predictably create a specific emotional state or affect in whoever was listening. A fast, trumpet-like melody could make you feel joy. A slow, descending line could make you feel sorrow. It was a shared emotional language.
So let's just contrast these two approaches for a second. On one hand, you've got Schumann, whose musical secrets are like these whispered messages between lovers, super personal, intimate, and based on shared memories. On the other hand, you have Bach, who used a systematic public code based on numbers and a shared theory of emotion. His symbolism feels grand, structured, universal, rooted in a belief system that pretty much everyone in his culture understood. And this hints at an even deeper layer of musical meaning.
Okay, but what if I told you that there was a time when listening to music was like watching a movie that was full of cultural references and inside jokes that everyone in the audience got, instantly? That's because for centuries, music had this rich vocabulary that today has been almost entirely forgotten. This is the whole idea of musical topics, a concept that was brilliantly defined by the musicologist Leonard Ratner. He figured out that composers in the 18th century had this shared thesaurus of musical ideas, and these weren't just abstract concepts, they were sounds and rhythms pulled directly from the world around them.
I mean, just think about it. An audience in Vienna in, say, 1780 would instantly recognize the rhythm of a courtly dance, the sound of a military bugle call, the powerful calls of hunting horns, or the simple tune of a shepherd's pipe. These weren't just musical effects. They were topics of conversation. They carried a whole world of meaning with them.
And when you think this way, it completely reframes how we listen. When a composer like Mozart used a horn call, he wasn't just adding a little color. No, he was deliberately bringing up the entire idea of the hunt, which was tied to the aristocracy, to nature, to a specific kind of noble outdoor life. It was a shared cultural symbol, kind of like a meme that we would all instantly understand today. The music was telling a story using a language of shared experience.
And here's the really important thing to remember. This was not a secret code for an elite few. It was a public language that nearly everyone in that culture understood instinctively. The tragedy is that over time, we've kind of lost the dictionary. We can still hear the beauty of the music, of course, but we often miss this rich, complex layer of conversation happening just beneath the surface. We hear the notes, but we miss the subtext.
So, where does all of this leave us? We started with this idea of a secret decoder ring for Beethoven and ended up with a lost language of cultural symbols. This really does fundamentally change how we can approach listening to music.
The goal, then, isn't to crack the code as if it's a single password. It's to appreciate the incredible density of communication that's happening in a great piece of music. It's the defiant signature of Shostakovich, the whispered love notes of Schumann, the divine order of Bach, and the vibrant public conversation of Mozart, all woven together. And maybe this quote from the composer John Cage is the most liberating idea of all. It reminds us that music isn't some locked box with one single meaning inside. It's a space for interpretation, for feeling, and for discovery. Learning about all these hidden layers doesn't give us the right answer. It just gives us more ways to listen, more stories to hear, and more connections to make. And this brings us to one last thought. We've been talking about composers from centuries ago, right? But this idea of layers of meaning, it's not just stuck in the past. So the next time you put on your favorite album, whatever the genre, listen a little closer. What personal stories, what cultural references, what secret languages are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for you to hear them?